Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to continue with Sherlock Holmes. And we're going to be discussing the story of the Hound of the Baskervilles, which is a very well-known, and from my slight research, one of the most documented of the Sherlock Holmes stories. This has been made into various different movies. Yes, Kendra is in my lap here. And various other forms of media besides the story. This story also was written after Conan Doyle officially actually killed off Sherlock Holmes, and sets it before Sherlock Holmes' death, and then he ended up bringing him back to life because apparently he upset most of London by killing off his fictional detective. And then he wrote stories on and off. But the Baskervilles was the first story that he wrote after he had originally intended to stop writing Sherlock Holmes stories. That's the reason he killed him off. But again, apparently his character was so popular, as is very, very obvious to this day, considering the many iterations of Sherlock Holmes that is everywhere. So yeah, he apparently you just cannot kill off Sherlock Holmes and keep him there. So the Hound of the Baskervilles is kind of an interesting story. It takes place in, I believe, Devonshire. So how it starts is a doctor comes to visit Holmes and Watson, and he's there to pick up the heir to this manor house because his friend, the previous owner, died suddenly. He had been walking out on his property amongst yew trees, which oddly enough are poisonous, and sorry for the yawning, it is almost 9:30 at night on the 25th of November. So it's Thanksgiving week. But moving on. Essentially, he was scared to death and his heart stopped. So, and it's very, very suspicious of how he died. So I think the relation, I believe his nephew is coming over from Canada and is his heir. So the heir shows up and they're trying to essentially, there was a note sent to him. It's like telling him to not come, and like to stay away from the manor. And it's like, what the heck is going on here? And so Holmes and Watson kind of talk. There may be somebody following them. Some of the young baronet is the term used, whose name is Henry, Sir Henry Baskerville. And so if his boots go missing and there's somebody following them, and then this person realizes the guy had visited Sherlock Holmes, so he heads back to London. They at first kind of suspect Monday evening. And I have a sick 5-year-old, and I just finished reading this. So moving on. They suspect the two servants, the husband and wife who were living in the house, who were the servants of Sir Charles, who was the previous, I think it's Lord Baskerville. So at first they kind of suspect him, but Holmes sends Watson back with Sir Henry, and you get a lot of notations through Watson's letters back to Holmes about what is going on, how he meets the neighbors, including a supposed naturalist and his sister, the Stapletons, and a few other neighbors, and explores the moor that extends next to the family home. Now, the legend that is part of this is that generations back, one of the lords fell in love with, I believe, one of the village girls. And her father said no, and him and his friends pounced across the moor and kidnapped her and locked her upstairs in the manor house, and then proceeded to get drunk. And she escaped, running across the moor, and then this gentleman chased after her, and they were both found dead. So, uh, in the moor. And supposedly, and I think there was maybe a hound out there that supposedly he had been mutilated. Basically, he'd been attacked. So, and I don't remember it specifying how she died. So it was now a supposed curse, which is the reason Sir Charles was very, very afraid of the moor and had nothing to do with it. So, but he would spend the evening walking in this tunnel of yew trees, and there was only one gate that led out onto the moor, and the night he died, he was kind of standing there for a while, and then he started running because something was chasing him, and then he dropped dead of fright because there was no mark on him, and he had a weak heart in the first place. So, sorry. So Watson and Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer go back. Dr. Mortimer is the friend and the senior medical man, though I think he's in his middle age. They find out that and at the time there's an escaped murderer wandering around the moor. And they find out it's the housekeeper's brother. And they're giving him food because apparently her family spoiled him and he was the baby, and then he became a murderer. Eventually, he is killed. Eventually, Watson is wandering around getting information. Then he discovers that Holmes has been hanging out for a while. And around that time, the Hound, though they don't actually see the Hound, they see the dog. They realize there's a dog, but it disappears, has killed at least they first think it's Sir Henry. Turns out it's the servant's brother wearing Sir Henry's clothing because they gave him some of his clothing, and this creature was going off scent. So, and of course by this time Holmes knows everything, and you know nothing. The only thing you know is the reason that Sir Charles was out there is because one of his neighbor's daughters, who had been disowned by him, had wrote him a letter asking for his assistance in paying lawyers to get her divorced because her husband was useless and annoying. And no, he's not actually part of this. So, but that is the reason. And Holmes knows everything. So, but Stapleton shows up, pretends to be shocked, and realizes when it's not Sir Henry, kind of hides the fact that he is not happy about this. So by this time, of course, you now know that Stapleton is the murderer, and that the person posing as his sister is his wife, but that he had this neighbor's daughter who had been disowned was being courted by Mr. Stapleton, and he was the one who had her write the letter and to get Sir Charles out because he had not been able to kill him because the guy would not step foot on the moor. So then Holmes and Watson pretend to go back to London. They go back to the main town, pick up the one of the members of Scotland Yard who Sherlock Holmes had summoned there. And then, because Sir Henry is going to told by Holmes, take a carriage to the Stapletons and then choose to walk home. So they're hiding out in the books. which is waiting for this hound. And when Sir Harry starts walking home, of course, Stapleton releases his hound with the scent. He's also put a sulfur paint to make him kind of glow in the dark, to make it scarier. Was chasing him down, and they shoot the thing. It's just a giant dog. And so, but by that time, because they used their guns to kill the dog, Stapleton had run through the moor, but there was a giant fog. That was part of the problem of them not getting the dog in the first place. And, or Stapleton for that matter. But it is supposed that he runs into, there's a swampy area of bog that's in the middle of the moor that he normally knows very well, and they have ways to light the way, but they can't be seen in the fog, and he's supposedly sunk into the swamp, and it has been swallowed, because part of some of the things that Watson witnessed was certain animals dying in the swamp, and Mr. Stapleton not really caring. So they get to the house. His wife is tied up and locked in a room, and he's nowhere to be found, and she confesses everything. And she tells them where he is. When the fog lifts the next morning, they cannot find him. They find, obviously, where the dog was, which is an old abandoned tin mine, because that's where he was keeping him. And then it jumps. And basically, Sherlock Holmes does not explain anything else. So you jump further for several weeks, after which Dr. Mortimer and Sir Harry have gone off to travel the world by ship to relax, because obviously Sir Henry's been traumatized, needless to say, from being attacked by a giant dog that glowed in the dark. So Watson has Holmes explain what the heck was going on, because there wasn't an arrest, so there was no reason to make the big reveal that you normally get. So Watson's like, okay, what the heck went on here? Because you never told me. So you find out that Stapleton was Sir Henry's cousin. His father had supposedly died unmarried in South America, but he had not. He had married. He'd had this one child. So Stapleton, who went by a different name, changed his name multiple times, came to England after he got married. His wife was Costa Rican. And came and became a school teacher for a while, then was apparently being a burglar because he really wanted money. Then he found out where his lineage was and decided to come and stay and pose his wife as his sister. But she refused to try to coerce Sir Charles. And so he beat the crap out of her and threatened her, and she still wouldn't do it. And then he found out about Miss Lyons, again the neighbor's daughter, and used her to scare this guy to death. And then you have the events of the rest of this story. So, and no, you do not know what happens to anybody else. And that's the end of this very interesting tale. It is as typical of Sherlock Holmes, and I think, though I will have to read her, Agatha Christie, you do not find out anything that is going on in these detectives' heads. They are obviously very, very formulaic, which can be very comforting, which makes them easy. I would not recommend this story for anything beyond middle school, and if your child is highly sensitive, don't be reading murder mysteries, particularly not ones written in the 1800s. So, set in Victorian England, because certain things die, and there's obviously various grisly murders going on. It's good, it's comforting if you're interested in Sherlock Holmes mysteries. Again, this is obviously one of the later ones, which I did not realize when I read this. The first Sherlock Holmes story I read was The Speckled Band, and that was when I was in elementary school. Obviously, it was a scholastic version, so much, much shorter. I have not read I may have, because I know my mother had a collection, which I think I actually have myself somewhere, of Sherlock Holmes stories. So, it was just, I was reading this version on my tablet, and my old ones are like in pieces. I'll look for another ones when I go to a used book sale, but nonetheless. But again, you get bits and pieces, but just like because the point of view character is Watson, who still can't pick up what Sherlock Holmes is doing because he keeps it very much in his head, you cannot follow along with this mystery because you do not follow along with any Sherlock Holmes mysteries. You get bits and pieces until there's a dramatic end, which this goes along with. I'm guessing this is in all of them because, again, I've read the first one that he wrote, which was the case of the, and now I can't even think about it, the Scarlet something. But the Study in Scarlet, that's what it was. So again, that's of course the first tale of Sherlock Holmes with the murderous Mormons. You can check out that review. But this one, of course, is very, very, interesting. You have this mythology of this legend that, of course, Sherlock Holmes does not believe, Watson doesn't believe. The farmer that is Sir Harry, that is what he was doing in Canada. He was a farmer. Didn't really believe it either. But, of course, when you have a giant dog coming at you that's covered in glowing paint, in the fog, in a moor, which is a giant flat piece of very prairie land, I think is almost the better way, only it's not dry. It's moist, very wet prairie land with not a lot of trees. Possibly come from the fact that the British, over many, many decades, had a lot of ships and cut down a lot of trees. So there's a lot of open land. But this is kind of more soft, wild, moor land. So, and given evening time and the country and fog, yeah, it's creepy. It was very, very creepy. But again, it's an interesting tale, definitely for middle school and up, because murders, and it's long. There's a lot of detail in here. Watson is very, very detailed. Well, Conan Doyle is very detailed, but in his role as Watson, he is very detailed about everything. Oh. It's a very interesting tale. It's just very late at night. At least for a mother of a small child. And the cat wants out. So, that is it for this tale. I will be covering, for this video, I will be covering the old, I think it's the 30s film. I can't remember the time period. The old film that I was able to get for the Hound of the Baskervilles. And be reviewing that on Friday when you guys see this, because you guys are seeing this in December. So the next, I will be reviewing that. That will be coming soon. Then we will finish off with some Agatha Christie stuff for December and then move into fairy tales. I grab this cat. The next media you should be seeing, because I think this is the last video I'm doing for films for the year of 2024. If you want to escape with me into fairy tales, the next thing I will be covering will be Wreck-It Ralph and Ralph Breaks the Internet, because there are Disney princesses in the second one. So, and then we will be covering Frozen, and then The Lion King, and then, because I've already covered The Princess and the Frog, you can check out that video. Then I'm covering Brave, which is Merida, and Irish fairy tales into that. I don't know if there's, and moving forward onto that, I can't remember. I think I might be doing The Little Mermaid after that, but I am covering all the Disney princesses this coming year. I may throw in Thumbelina and Swan Lake and Anastasia, though are now owned by Disney. They were not Disney films at the time, but they are now owned by Disney, so they are, for all intents and purposes, Disney princesses. So, like and subscribe, leave a positive comment if you have one, and I will see you next time. Thank you.